President.
The Majority Whip.
Mr. President, I thank my colleague from Minnesota, and I especially thank my colleague from Maryland. The senator from Maryland has been working on this issue for a long time, and Ben, thank you for your leadership. And Lisa Murkowski, making it a bipartisan effort. I've got a good speech here, but I want to tell you a story. And the story goes back to my graduation from law school and the first job I ever had. I was working for the lieutenant governor of the state of Illinois, a man named Paul Simon, who went on to be elected to Congress and to the United States Senate. Simon, as lieutenant governor of Illinois, presided over the Illinois State Senate. We had met one another, and he said he was going to offer me a job when I graduated from law school. And lo and behold, I became parliamentarian of the Illinois State Senate, fresh out of law school. Skipped my graduation ceremony because I desperately needed some money to pay off some bills, and started working in Springfield, Illinois as parliamentarian of the State Senate. Simon mistakenly believed that there was a course in law school called parliamentary law. There wasn't. I had to learn it by just reading the rule book over and over again until it became familiar. But eventually I was pretty good at it. And I needed to be, because we had a big debate going on in Springfield, Illinois in the early 1970s about something called the Equal Rights Amendment. It was different than the debate in many state capitals because there was a real confrontation. There was no party identity behind or for the Equal Rights Amendment. Some Republicans supported it, many Democrats supported it, but there was opposition on both parties too. What fired up the troops on that particular debate was the presence of a woman from Alton, Illinois, named Phyllis Schlafly, who was leading the national effort to stop the Equal Rights Amendment. I reflect on that this evening because I remember what she used to say. If you pass the Equal Rights Amendment, men and women are going to use the same bathrooms. And not only that, women are going to be forced to fight in combat in the military. They'll be drafted and they'll be off fighting in military. And I look back on those arguments now and say, is that it? Was that really the debate on the equality of women in America came down to those two issues? I thought of it the other day when I went into a school that I was visiting, and they had a same-gender restroom, take a single-member restroom, but either gender could use it. And I thought, Phyllis Schlafly's dream came true. We are sharing the same restrooms in some places. And when it comes to combat in the military, many women across the United States fought for that right to do so and have served our country honorably. But those were the arguments and the differences of the day which led the debate and led to Illinois not ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment in the 1970s. That didn't happen until very recently. We had a hearing on this, as you know, Mr. President, in the Senate Judiciary Committee, and I listened to the critics of the Equal Rights Amendment today. I didn't hear anything about same-sex restrooms and nothing about combat in the military, but one lady raised the prospect that if we passed the Equal Rights Amendment, it would ruin her daughter's field hockey team in high school, because there may be some transgender individuals wanting to play on her daughter's team. And I thought to myself, so now it's come down to that. It's no longer restrooms or combat pay. It's a question of field hockey for young ladies. Well, I know that's an important part of their lives, and she told us as much. But when I reflect on what the reality of this amendment does, it seems that those things pale in comparison. The language of it is so express and so clear that most people in the United States really would be surprised to know it's not already in the Constitution. No discrimination against people on the basis of sex. Most people assume that's the fact, but it's not. We have to do something about it. Tonight, we're seeing the Senate at its best, a bipartisan effort on the floor of the United States Senate to finally make this right by America. The Equal Rights Amendment is literally a century in the making. And over the years, generations of Americans have done their part to push it forward. They've marched on Washington, they've met with congressmen and senators, and as of 2020, they've crossed a crucial threshold, ratification of the ERA in 38 states. That's the exact number of states needed to certify it as the 28th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. So now it's time for lawmakers in Congress to do our part in supporting the ERA. We need to clear a path for equality. And this proposal, this bipartisan proposal from Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland, Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, is our chance to do it. It will remove the arbitrary deadline Congress imposed on ERA ratification more than 50 years ago, and removing that deadline has never been more important. As we learned over the past year, there is no room for uncertainty when it comes to protecting equal rights. Right now, women all across America are living with the reality that their fundamental freedoms are under attack. In the months since the disastrous Dobbs decision, millions of Americans have been robbed of their reproductive rights. Activist judges and far-right politicians have replaced the will of the people and the expertise of medical professionals with their own radical beliefs. And women living in states like Texas, Oklahoma, and most recently Florida and North Dakota have fewer rights today than their parents and grandparents did decades ago. All of this chaos and confusion is jeopardizing the lives of women and upending our healthcare system. We had another hearing today. There was testimony in that hearing by a young lady from Texas who went through an awful ordeal at the end of a pregnancy which she wanted desperately. It was her first child. It would have been her first daughter. Willow was the name that she'd given her. And then late in the pregnancy, complications arose, and Willow was unfortunately couldn't be born, and the mother almost died waiting to comply with the new Texas law on abortion. I'm going to remember that testimony for a long time. Without ERA protections, even basic rights like reproduction are on the chopping block. Protection against discrimination in the workplace, in the classroom, even in the courtroom. Unless women's rights are explicitly protected under the Constitution, there's nothing stopping the right-wing majority on the court from ripping them away. That's why Congress must restore and protect women's rights in all facets of life. We can do it this week by clearing the way to finally enshrine gender equality in the Constitution. I had the honor of presiding over a hearing on this very proposal in the Senate Judiciary Committee several weeks ago. During that hearing, we heard from a young woman whose name was Thursday Williams, first-generation American, board member of the ERA Coalition, senior at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. Ms. Williams is planning on attending law school after she graduates from college. She says she developed a passion for the law when she, quote, fell in love with the United States Constitution in high school. In her words, and I quote her, "What I love the most about the Constitution is how brilliantly it was designed to adapt to the changing needs of its people. And today, we deserve a Constitution that guarantees equality regardless of sex, a Constitution that we can use as a tool to fight discrimination." That was her testimony. Ms. Williams concluded by asking members of the committee a question. It's a question I would like to now ask every member of the Senate. How can we be the beacon of freedom and democracy we claim to be if we do not declare that sex discrimination contradicts the American dream? That was Thursday Williams' question to the Senate Judiciary Committee. It's my question to the Senate on her behalf. If we want to live up to the promise of America, we need to protect the rights of every American. Let's start with the ERA. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.